I recently learned about Zohran Mamdani, and when I heard the policies that he wants to implement in New York City, I had a visceral reaction. They're intended to close the wealth gap, and as good intentioned as they are, the plan for execution is underwhelming. It's all socialist policies that will drive rich people away from one of the biggest cities in the United States.
Meantime, President Trump mentioned Mamdani during his news conference earlier today. Listen here.
They're worried that somebody that, like this communist from New York, someday gets elected. I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York. But the rest of the country is revolting against it.
Let's bring in Matt.
And the reason that Trump is saying that he's a communist is because one of the things that he's trying to do is establish city-run grocery stores. So I know that we have other socialist things as far as like fire departments, schools, libraries, you know, some of the infrastructure that we rely on every day. And I'm not necessarily opposed to those things. We can't hand everything off to the government. At some point, the only way to empower people is to put money back into their pockets by lowering the taxes. And I'm not just talking about the highest 1%, because I really don't give a damn about those people having money or not having money. I care about my family and the people around me being able to survive, right? I'm not of the 1%. I'm sure that they'll be perfectly fine. Let's get back into the content. I just wanted to say, give you guys some context on why Trump was calling him a communist and people are rebelling against some of his ideas.
Whitlock, former senior advisor at the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and Megan Hayes, former director of message planning for the Biden White House. So you would expect President Trump would say something like that about Mamdani. What you might not expect is for the Washington Post to say this: Zohran Mamdani's victory is bad for New York and the Democratic Party. New Yorkers should be worried that he would lead Gotham back to the bad old days of civic dysfunction. And Democrats should fear that he will discredit their next generation of party leaders, almost all of whom are better than this Democratic socialist.
I don't know why anybody would think that the Washington Post wouldn't say something like that. I believe the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. That dude does not want to see any sort of policies that would increase taxes. So anybody that's surprised that this is something that the Washington Post would put out, you're being dishonest. But you know, the Democratic Party, they kind of did this to themselves because people saw how the Democratic Party railroaded Bernie back in 2016. As soon as Bernie started getting any sort of traction, they started with the Bernie Bros thing and basically chastising anybody that wanted to vote for Bernie. And at the time, I did vote for him. But as I've gotten older, as I've gotten different responsibilities and priorities in terms of having a family, my politics have kind of shifted. And the reason why is you can't just give everything to the government. If we're giving all of our paycheck or we're increasing more and more progressively how much we give to the government, they're going to waste the money. I don't think that it's going to be any better over in New York either. I think the things that plague these places that are ruled by Democrats are going to plague them wherever you go. Good luck to Mamdani and the people of New York if they elect him. But I don't think that he has the right solutions to lead us into the future. But one thing he is doing is using social media pretty well, because I went from not knowing him at all. You know, I've seen videos of him, but I went from not knowing who he was at all to seeing his videos all up and down the timeline.
Republicans would love to make Mamdani the new face of the Democratic Party. Are you comfortable with that?
No, and my views don't align with him, but I also don't live in New York City, so my views don't matter here because I don't vote in New York City. What might work in New York will not work in the rest of the country, as we very well know. But I do think it is important for Democrats to realize that they want a new generation of leadership. He campaigned on economic changes and economic values that are different than what other people were campaigning on, and that is important. And I think one thing that people will learn here is that campaigning 100%. Is always easier than governing. So if he is elected, he will find that it's probably very hard to have some of his policies enacted. But I do think that Democrats should take note on how he campaigned and who he reached, because that will be important moving into the midterms.
A lot of people have talked to think that the real selling point for him was the rent control idea, because you're a young person in New York, trying to afford a place to live is almost impossible. But he's got some other very...
Yeah, the rent control, it sounds good, right? Like I said in the other video, the things that he's proposing sound good, but you can't have a government-owned grocery store. You can't rent control because the people that are investors into the city of New York, they're not going to continue to invest in that infrastructure there. They're not going to continue to invest in housing. A lot of people rent because when you rent, that's the most you're going to pay for your property, for the property that you live in. But when you are an owner, that's the minimum. Whatever your mortgage is the minimum that you're going to pay for the property.
Controversial positions, including defund the police, abolish the prison system, ban all guns, decriminalize sex work, safe injection sites, end cash bail, decriminalize drug possession. Those have all been tried in other states.
Let me check this out. Defund the police, not with it. He wants to replace the police with social workers. It's not going to work. Social workers have an important role in society, but it's not arresting people and making sure that society is safe. Do the police get it right every time? Absolutely not. They had the thing with Khalif Browder, right? So I'm not saying that the police get it right every time. They absolutely make mistakes, like fatal and tragic mistakes. Abolish the prison system. No. There's some people in the world that you just can't rehabilitate. They have to have somewhere to go. They need to be separated from society. Prohibit state-operated hospitals from suing for medical debt. I'm not too sure about that. I don't have an opinion on that one. Universal health care. I would love to have universal health care. Like that's one of the things that I would be okay if my taxes increased so that everybody has health care. Because as I've gotten out of the military, I've realized the civilian health care is wild. It doesn't make sense to me, right? You have to make all of these different elections and there's coverage for this, but then this is a separate coverage. It just doesn't make sense. When I was in the military, even if you went to a hospital that wasn't directly associated with the military, when you got that bill, you took it to the medical, and they took care of it. Ban all guns. I told you just now, I'm prior service. I like my guns. Not with that. Decriminalize sex work. This is something I can get behind. It makes no sense that prostitution is not legal to me. Am I trying to buy some? No, I'm not. But this is people's own body. Let them make a decision with their body, with what they want to do and what's not okay with them. Safe injection sites that has something to do with drugs. You guys know how I feel on the channel. You should be able to do whatever it is that you want with your own body. End cash bail. Don't have an opinion on that. Decriminalize drug possession and cooperate in cooperation with ICE. Nope. People got to go. If you're in this country illegally and you're supposed to be in your home country and you cross the border, you got to go home. It is what it is. I don't know why we're advocating so hard for people that came here illegally or they had temporary protective status to continue to be here indefinitely. That's not the way that the system works. And if you don't agree, you move everybody that's on the streets, you move them into your house and see how long that lasts. Because that's essentially what's happened. People have left their home country and moved into the U.S. and they want to stay here indefinitely.
And it was disaster. He also wants to end cooperation with ICE. I mean, that will probably get him some points with other Democrats. But Democrats lost on a lot of these issues last November. They want to go back there again?
It's a very interesting misread. What happened here is politics is a pendulum. And this election ended up being energized by anti-Trump sentiment, but it really is more a referendum on the Democratic Party and on Democrat leadership. This is what a lot of us call the David Hogg effect. You remember David Hogg came in and said, we need to get rid of incumbents. And so they removed him from party leadership. I also think Mamdani benefited from running against Andrew Cuomo, who in the last few years has basically become a cartoon villain political candidate, both with accusations of serial groping, but also his role in the deaths of a lot of people's grandparents in New York. So I think Mamdani benefited from that, but I think Republicans see an opportunity to benefit from a pick your poison, fairly radical candidate who supports everything from, as you were saying, defunding the police, which is about a 90-10 issue, to things like, socialism that has already tried and failed before, and a number of other policies that I think Republicans feel they have an opportunity to really capitalize on in, for example, the New Jersey governor's race this November.
One of the other things that he can't...
Before we get too far away from it, the gentleman that's on the right, I'm not entirely sure his name. He's in a blue suit. He said something about the Democrats ran on these ideas and policies. We have decade after decade after decade of these career politician Democrats telling us things that they were going to do that never happened. Y'all keep promising these things like, oh, we're going to cancel student debt. We're going to, even though I dropped out of school, I never had student debt. But the things that were being promised were continually not happening. right? And then the person that was a populist, Bernie, about 10 years ago, when he started to pick up steam, they started doing the same thing that they're doing to Mamdani. They started railroading them, putting all these different ads that made people second guess. So, like I said, I'm not with his policies necessarily. He's doing what he thinks is best for the people of New York. And I disagree. I don't think that it's best. I think that the government needs to take a step back out of people's lives. I think they need to empower people economically by putting more money in their pocket. And that's the way that people are going to reach financial freedom. If you want to help people be successful in their lives, if there's anything that you should do, keep money in their pocket and help them get financial education so they make better decisions with their money instead of leaning on the government, thinking that, you know, the person that's in office is going to be the solution to their problems. You got to be the solution to your own problems.